Donald Trump's economic policies, often presented with aggressive flair and wrapped in nationalist rhetoric, have promised to transform the American economy. His key agenda items, deporting millions of undocumented immigrants and imposing aggressive tariffs on foreign goods, are central to his broader plan for what he calls economic nationalism. His administration's focus on protectionism and reducing immigration has stirred strong support from his political base, promising to bring jobs back to America and put America first. But this economic vision is far from the sweeping success that Trump and his supporters claim it to be. In reality, these policies, when fully implemented, have the potential to wreak havoc on the U.S. economy. By proposing mass deportations of undocumented workers and threatening a trade war with Canada, Mexico, and China, Trump's economic approach is akin to cutting off vital arteries in the nation's economic circulatory system. The consequences of this dual-pronged attack, deportations and tariffs, could be catastrophic. While the premise of these policies may resonate with certain segments of the population, the impact on industries crucial to the functioning of the U.S. economy cannot be overstated. From the rising costs of goods and services to the imminent collapse of key sectors, Trump's economic nightmare is unfolding, and it threatens to send the country into an economic spiral. The economic cost of mass deportations. One of the most contentious elements of Trump's economic plan is the deportation of 11 million undocumented immigrants. Trump has repeatedly vowed to remove millions of undocumented workers from the U.S. labor force, painting them as a drain on resources and a burden to American taxpayers. However, a closer look reveals that these workers are not just illegal immigrants, but integral members of the American workforce, contributing to industries that are foundational to the country's economy. The agricultural industry, the fragility of the U.S. food supply chain. The U.S. agricultural sector is heavily dependent on immigrant labor, especially undocumented workers. According to various reports, approximately half of the nation's farm workers are foreign-born, and a significant percentage of these workers are undocumented. This labor force is responsible for planting, harvesting, processing, and packaging the nation's food. Without these workers, the U.S. food supply chain would face near collapse. Labor shortages and rising costs. If Trump's deportation plan were implemented, farms would lose a substantial portion of their workforce overnight. With fewer people available to perform physically demanding tasks like picking crops, farmers would be forced to raise wages to attract workers. This increase in labor costs would be passed down the supply chain, ultimately driving up the cost of food. Food prices skyrocket. For consumers, this would mean higher grocery bills. The USDA estimates that removing undocumented workers from the agricultural sector could increase food prices by 10% to 20%, with staples such as fruits, vegetables, dairy products, and meats becoming significantly more expensive. Rural economies in crisis. Immigrants, especially undocumented ones, make up the backbone of rural economies. Without them, small-town economies that rely on farming and agriculture would face major disruptions. The loss of these workers would lead to a decline in economic activity, affecting everything from local businesses to schools and healthcare services. The construction industry, the crippling of housing development. The construction industry in the U.S. is another sector that would be devastated by Trump's proposed mass deportations. Around 40% of the workers in the U.S. construction industry are immigrants, and a significant portion of them are undocumented. These workers fill essential roles in building new homes, commercial buildings, and infrastructure. Deporting millions of undocumented workers would lead to widespread labor shortages in construction, significantly hindering the industry. A stagnant housing market. The housing industry is already facing challenges, with demand for homes far outstripping supply in many parts of the country. Without immigrant labor to help meet the demand for new housing and commercial buildings, the pace of construction would slow dramatically. This could lead to a severe housing shortage, pushing home prices higher and making homeownership unattainable for many Americans. Increased costs for builders and consumers. With fewer workers available to perform construction tasks, builders would have to pay significantly higher wages to attract labor. This would increase the cost of building materials and housing. For consumers, this means rising costs for both new homes and rent. The average American would bear the brunt of these increased costs. Impact on infrastructure. Public infrastructure projects, such as the construction of roads, bridges, and schools, would also be delayed. Many of these projects are dependent on immigrant labor, and without these workers, essential infrastructure could remain unfinished, hindering overall economic growth and reducing quality of life in many communities. See the food processing and manufacturing sectors, broken supply chains, and rising prices. In addition to agriculture and construction, undocumented workers are crucial in other sectors such as food processing and manufacturing. These workers perform jobs that are vital to the production and distribution of food and goods, from working in meatpacking plants to manufacturing electronics and other consumer products. Labor shortages in food processing. The food processing industry, in particular, would suffer immensely from a reduction in the immigrant labor force. A significant percentage of workers in meatpacking, poultry processing, and food packaging are undocumented. The loss of this workforce would lead to production slowdowns, price hikes, and supply chain disruptions. Higher costs for everyday goods. From food to consumer electronics, the removal of undocumented workers from manufacturing would result in shortages and price hikes. Retail prices for everything from cell phones to clothes could rise by as much as 25%, burdening middle-class families already struggling with stagnant wages and inflation. 2. Trump's tariff policy, a recipe for trade war and economic disruption. At the same time that Trump is pushing for mass deportations, his administration is also pursuing an aggressive tariff strategy aimed at several key trading partners, including Canada, Mexico, and China. While Trump supporters claim that these tariffs are necessary to protect American industry from unfair foreign competition, the reality is that tariffs often lead to higher prices, supply chain disruptions, and retaliatory measures from trading partners. A. Tariffs on Canada and Mexico, disrupting North American trade and relations. Canada and Mexico are two of the United States' largest trading partners, accounting for approximately 40% of total U.S. trade. Trump's proposal to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods would have serious consequences for American businesses and consumers. Higher prices on essential goods. Canada and Mexico are major suppliers of goods like lumber, oil, vehicles, and agricultural products. A 25% tariff on these goods would raise the cost of building materials, gasoline, food, and manufactured products. For example, Canadian lumber makes up a significant portion of the wood used in housing construction. A tariff on lumber would raise construction costs and lead to higher prices for new homes. Retaliation and trade tensions. Both Canada and Mexico would likely retaliate with their own tariffs on U.S. exports, such as agricultural products, automobiles, and machinery. This would hurt U.S. farmers, manufacturers, and workers, leading to job losses and a slowdown in economic growth. Disruption of cross-border supply chains. North America's economies are deeply integrated, with companies in the U.S. relying on imports from Canada and Mexico to manufacture goods. Tariffs would disrupt these supply chains, leading to delays, increased costs, and a reduction in the competitiveness of U.S. businesses in global markets. B. The China trade war, escalating tensions with the world's second-largest economy. Perhaps the most high-profile aspect of Trump's tariff policy is his ongoing trade war with China. Trump has proposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, claiming that China has been manipulating trade practices to the detriment of the U.S. economy. While China does engage in unfair trade practices, the effect of tariffs is often more harmful to the U.S. economy than the targeted country. Rising costs for American consumers. Many of the goods Americans purchase, from electronics to clothing, are made in China. A 10% tariff on these products would increase prices for U.S. consumers. For example, The cost of smartphones, televisions, and other electronic devices would rise, straining household budgets. Disruption of global supply chains. Many U.S. companies rely on Chinese-made components for their products. For instance, U.S. car manufacturers depend on Chinese-made parts for assembly. Tariffs would increase the cost of production, leading to higher prices for consumers and reducing the competitiveness of U.S. businesses. China's retaliation and market instability. China would likely retaliate by imposing its own tariffs on U.S. goods, leading to a reduction in American exports to China. This could result in job losses in industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, and technology. The economic instability caused by the trade war could also lead to volatility in global financial markets. Donald Trump's economic policies, particularly the combination of mass deportations and aggressive tariffs, pose a dire threat to the U.S. economy. These policies would disrupt vital industries, raise costs for consumers, and invite retaliatory measures from trading partners. The removal of millions of undocumented workers would create labor shortages in key sectors like agriculture, construction, and food processing, leading to higher prices and slower economic growth. Meanwhile, Trump's trade war with Canada, Mexico, and China would disrupt supply chains, harm American businesses, and reduce the U.S. competitiveness on the global stage. Rather than creating a boom economy, Trump's economic vision risks throwing the U.S. into a state of economic stagnation or recession. The fallout from his policies could be severe and far-reaching, affecting millions of workers and consumers across the nation. It is crucial that policymakers reconsider these strategies and focus on more sustainable, inclusive economic solutions that promote growth and stability for all Americans.